We begin not in the temple, but in the mirror. The face staring back is both familiar and strange, a map of survival, an archive of stories never written, only lived. This is your altar, this is your weapon, this is your wound. The body has always been the battleground. Before there were grimoires or holy books, before incense smoked up from cracked stone, there was the flesh, bleeding, breathing, burning with purpose. Religion has tried to tame it. Capitalism has tried to commodify it. Society has tried to define it within binaries, roles, and expectations. But the witch, the mystic, the outcast, the survivor, they have always known that the body is a spell in itself. In today's video, we're going to explore three sacred aspects of embodied power: the body as altar, weapon, and wound. These are not separate roles, but overlapping states of being, each informing the other. The altar is not only a place of prayer, but of sacrifice. The weapon is not just used in defense or attack, it becomes ritual, dance, resistance. The wound is not merely a sign of harm, but a site of magic, where healing and truth emerge from the torn places. To treat the body as an altar is to acknowledge that everything you do to it is, and with it, is a form of devotion. To see it as a weapon is to reclaim power in a world that constantly attempts to render you powerless. And to understand it as wound is to know that pain itself holds portals to the divine. For witches and mystics, especially those whose identities defy the expectations of gender, race, ability, or sexuality, the body is not just a shell to be transcended. It is a ritual tool, a mirror of the cosmos, and a field of transformation. Each scar can be a sigil. Each movement can be a rite. Each choice you make about how to live in your body is an act of magical will. This is not an abstract metaphysical idea. It is urgent, grounded, and political. Because the forces that wish to erase us often start with the body. They legislate it, police it, shame it. But the same body they seek to erase can be made holy. It can become a temple of fire. And so we begin with a spell of seeing, not just looking at the body, but into it. What has it endured? What has it survived? What powers does it still hold, unclaimed or forgotten? This is not about self-love as a marketing slogan. It's about self-reclamation as a magical act. Because your body is already sacred, already dangerous, already marked by myth. To see the body as altar is to reject the idea that the sacred must be found elsewhere. It is to refuse the split between flesh and spirit that so many traditions have enforced, often in the service of control. The witch knows otherwise. The witch knows that power resides in the blood, in the skin, in the breath. The altar is not just a flat surface on which to place offerings. It is a living structure of devotion. And what could be more potent than your own body? When we anoint ourselves, dress with intention, paint our faces, or adorn our skin with symbols, these are not merely acts of vanity or fashion, they are rites. To choose how we present ourselves to the world is to craft a spell. A smudged black line across the eyes becomes a ward. A necklace worn close to the heart becomes a charm. The placing of a ring, the brushing of oil into the scalp, the wrapping of cloth around the hips, all gestures that can be infused with purpose and presence. Historically, we see this truth echoed in every culture where the body becomes both medium and message. Consider the tattoos of the Picts, the scarification practices of various African and Oceanic peoples, the painted faces of warriors and shamans, the hennaed hands of celebrants. These markings were not aesthetic decoration alone, they were devotional acts, protective rites, lineage claims. The body bore the symbols of the gods, spirits, or ancestors. It was the altar and the scripture. Today we reclaim these acts through intentional bodily ritual, a witch may wake each morning and stretch with breath in mind, invoking the four directions with the slow unfurling of limbs. They may trace sigils on their skin with oil or ash before leaving the house, whispering charms of protection or seduction. The morning routine, often dismissed as mundane, becomes sacred when consciousness is applied. Brushing the hair becomes a rite of clarity. Washing the face becomes a baptism. Feeding oneself becomes an offering to the spirit within. There is a reason oppressive systems have sought to control bodies, especially those of women, queer people, black and brown people, and disabled folk. Because when you control the body, you control the soul. You teach people to be ashamed of their own temple. You sever them from their inherent power. The witch who tends their body as an altar resists this. They reject the shame. They light a candle in their own name. Pleasure, too, is altar work. Not merely sexual pleasure, though that is part of it, but the full range of embodied joy. Dancing, eating with abandon, soaking in hot water, lying in the sun. To let the body feel joy is a sacred act in a culture that wants us numb and obedient. The ecstatic witch traditions of the past, from the Dionysian rites of ancient Greece to the spirit possession dances of Afro-diasporic religions, understood that divinity entered not through denial, but through surrender, through shaking, sweating, howling, laughing, through the collapse of false boundaries between body and spirit. And then, of course, there is pain. The altar is a place of sacrifice, and the body is no exception. This is not to glorify suffering, but to recognize that pain can be transmuted. Blood offered to the spirits, sweat shed in devotion, tattoos that mark rites of passage, the binding of the body in ritual posture. These are all ways in which discomfort becomes meaningful. When the body is engaged with intention, even pain becomes a vehicle for transcendence. There are many witches for whom their body is not always a safe or pleasant place. Chronic pain, gender dysphoria, disability, or trauma can make embodiment feel like a battlefield. And yet, especially for those whose bodies are stigmatized or marginalized, the act of tending to the flesh with reverence is even more radical. To say, I am still sacred, I am still whole, even when broken, even when hurting, I am not unworthy of devotion, I am devotion. To live magically is to live intentionally, and the body is the first site of that intention. Not every ritual needs incense and chant. Sometimes it needs rest, sometimes it needs touch, sometimes it needs food that nourishes rather than punishes. These too are offerings. The body as altar reminds us that the spiritual is not elsewhere. It is in the rise and fall of the breath. It is in the texture of skin. It is in how we treat ourselves, how we honor what we carry, and how we choose to show up. When the witch steps into ritual space, it is not only the circle that becomes sacred, it is the witch themselves, feet planted like roots, arms raised like antlers, heart beating like a drum. The altar body holds space for paradox. It is soft and strong. It is vulnerable and defiant. It is the place where spirit lands. And in tending it, you do not make yourself sacred. You remember that you already are. If the altar is a site of devotion, the weapon is the site of resistance. The body does not simply house the soul, it enacts it. And when the world becomes hostile to your existence, then it tries to shape you into silence, conformity, and shame, and your body can become your line of refusal. It is the place from which power radiates outward, where spells become stances and protection becomes posture. To weaponize the body is not to desecrate it, but to wield it. This is not about violence for its own sake. It is about survival, about holding ground, about refusing to vanish. For the punk witch, especially one forged in struggle, the body is the first tool of rebellion. This rebellion begins with embodiment. In a world designed to dissociate and disconnect, Simply being present in the body is a radical act. Capitalism teaches us to override exhaustion. Religion teaches us to demonize desire. Oppression teaches us to shrink, to hide, to twist ourselves into acceptable shapes. But the embodied witch does not play by those rules. They take up space, they breathe audibly, they dress how they please, they walk into a room like they belong there because they do. Their body does not ask for permission, it declares its presence like a spell. The body is a weapon when it is used to disrupt. Gender nonconformity is a spell against patriarchy. Blackness, queerness, disability, all have been targets of erasure and control. And so their visibility becomes defiance. Each time the body refuses to be palatable or quiet, it becomes sharpened. The cloak of invisibility is burned, and what emerges is raw, undeniable truth. Witchcraft has always recognized this power. Think of the evil eye, the venomous glare that withers crops and sickens livestock, originating not in fiction, but in real fear of envy, rage, and intention. A witch's eye could curse, a witch's tongue could hex, a witch's presence alone could be dangerous. These were not metaphors, these were acknowledgments of the force that lives in the flesh, in the voice, in the will. The body, when charged, radiates. A well-placed stare, a whispered phrase, a sudden stillness, they can pierce deeper than any blade, because the body speaks in a language older than speech, and the witch learns to use that language. There is also the matter of eroticism. To some, it is taboo. To the punk witch, it is sacred power. The erotic body is not just for pleasure. It is a current of will and desire strong enough to shift reality. Sex magic is one expression of this, but it extends further into how we move, how we seduce, how we express longing and fury and joy through our skin. Audre Lorde, in her seminal essay, Uses of the Erotic, reminded us that the erotic is not frivolous, it is a source of knowledge and strength. It reminds us of what is possible, what is worthy, what is true. When weaponized, it becomes not a tool of control, but of liberation. And let us not forget pain. Pain, too, can be wielded. The body that has endured becomes fluent in suffering, but also in the defiance of it. Pain can be a curse or a teacher, and sometimes both. Witches have long worked with their own thresholds, cutting, binding, fasting, dancing until collapse, not for the sake of harm, but for the sake of crossing a threshold. Pain, when transformed through ritual, becomes fuel. When you can sit with it, name it, own it, you deny it control. You break the silence around it and turn it into song. There are practical ways this plays out. A protective spell cast with breath and heartbeat, a confrontation faced with spine straight and jaw unclenched, a ritual cloak thrown over shoulders like armor. The body becomes a shield, a blade, a beacon. It holds the charge. It is the casting circle. Consider also how your body moves through digital space. In techno-mystic terms, your avatar, your selfies, your chosen usernames and icons all form part of your magical weaponry. The image you curate, the voice you speak with, the rhythm of your engagement. These are spells of identity. They can cut through illusion, challenge dogma, and signal to others that you are awake, that you are watching, that you are not afraid. And so the body is not just a vessel. It is a banner raised. It is the fist and the flame. It is the edge of the spell. To weaponize the body is not to destroy, it is to defend, to declare, to dare. It is to show the world what happens when flesh and will unite. And in the hands of the punk witch, this is no ordinary weapon. This is a holy blade. Everybody carries wounds, some visible, some hidden beneath layers of flesh and silence. These wounds are not just remnants of injury, they are thresholds. They are entrances to the deepest mysteries where suffering becomes knowledge and pain becomes spellwork. The witch does not deny their wounds, they tend them, read them, listen to what they are saying, because the wound too is sacred. In a society obsessed with wellness, perfection, and healing as a destination, we are taught to treat wounds as failures, to hide them, to overcome them as quickly and quietly as possible. But the wounded body is not broken, it is marked. And those marks, whether they be scars, illnesses, memories, or traumas, there is power. The punk witch understands this not only through theory, but through lived experience. Trauma leaves energetic imprints, shadowy echoes that live in the bones, the organs, the nervous system. The body remembers what the mind forgets. Dreams speak in the voice of the wound. Panic rises like a revenant. Sometimes the pain is not yours alone, it belongs to your lineage. The dead whisper through your blood, ancestral grief curls up in your spine. Rather than seeking to erase the wound, the witch listens. The scar becomes a signal, a map of survival. What was once the site of damage becomes a site of meaning, a place where something sacred has already occurred, whether or not it was chosen. In ritual, we may anoint these scars, trace them with oil or ash, offer them back to the spirits who hold our pain with tenderness, not judgment. Say, this happened, I am still here. There is an entire branch of magic rooted in this knowing: shadow work, necromantic healing, ancestral tending. These practices recognize that our power is braided with pain, that the witch who has wept and raged and clawed their way back from despair is not weaker for it, but wiser. Their magic is bloodied and real. Their altar does not need to be pure, it needs to be true. To live with a wound is to live with a portal. It opens and reopens. Some days it aches with prophecy, some days it hums with strange clarity. Pain becomes a teacher, not a tyrant. Not all wounds will heal, and that is not failure. Some wounds are meant to be carried. They are part of the witch's tools, not because suffering is holy, but because the endurance of it is. Because knowing how to hold pain without collapsing is a kind of ritual strength that cannot be faked. Grief rituals are especially important here. In many traditional societies, grief was communal and ritualized, wailed into the earth, carried on wind, expressed through keening, weeping, rending of clothes. In the modern world, grief is expected to be quiet, linear, and short-lived. But witches know better. We know that grief cycles, that it returns on anniversaries in certain sense, in the way shadows fall at dusk. That to grieve is to love honestly. The wound also connects us, it shatters the illusion of separation. When we name our pain, we make space for others to do the same. There is courage in vulnerability, not the kind of performative exposure encouraged by algorithms, but deep, sacred honesty. The kind that says, this is my story and I survived it. The kind that forms the bones of covens, circles, chosen families. The kind that rebuilds trust between people, between parts of the self. Sometimes the wound is not historical, it is present. It is chronic illness, disability, a body that will not or cannot function the way others expect it to. Here, too, the witch makes magic, not by pretending it doesn't hurt, but by finding what else is true. A body can be both in pain and full of beauty. A disabled body is not a failure. It is a different shape of magic. A neurodivergent mind is not broken. It is a different rhythm of insight. We do not need to heal to be whole. We do not need to be unscarred to be powerful. Indeed, the wound is often what grants the witch their sight. The mythic wounded healer, the blind seer, the outcast prophet. These are archetypes born from deep truth. Those who have touched the edge of death or despair see things others cannot. They walk between worlds because they have lived in the liminal. They do not flinch from the dark. They recognize what is holy in the haunted. The wound is the place the light enters, yes, but it is also where the truth leaks out. To treat the body as a wound is not to wallow in suffering, nor to romanticize trauma. It is to honor the lived reality of pain without shame. It is to allow the body to speak in its own language, to weep when it needs to rage, to go silent, to howl beneath the moon, and then, when ready, to turn that wound outward into the world. It was a cry of pity, but as a banner of truth. This happened, I lived, I made magic with it. And in doing so, we reclaim not only the body, but the story. We write ourselves anew, not in spite of the wound, but through it. Your body is not accidental. It is not a mistake. It is not a burden to be overcome or a raw material to be shaped into acceptability. It is the altar where your devotion is made real. It is the weapon with which you cut through lies and speak your name into silence. It is the wound through which truth pours, where gods touch flesh and leave marks behind. To walk this path, witch, mystic, survivor, rebel, is to live inside a spell you write with every breath. Not a spell of perfection, but of presence. A spell cast not in words, but in blood, in motion, in skin. Tend it, wield it, listen to it. Your body remembers what your mind may forget. You are sacred, dangerous, and true. Let them call it blasphemy if they must. We know it is power.